Let's Get To presents
Go Astros!
Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And welcome to Go Astros. I'm your host, James Christopher, and the Astros have done it. Their backs were against the wall, and as we've seen with this team over the last 3 to 4 to 5 years, what they do when their back's against the wall is they respond. And so they did respond yesterday, and it was a weird series in Atlanta, and I don't think those guys would make excuses, but I do wonder if getting the routine thrown off, not taking BP on the field, therefore not getting to see, how the ball looks coming out of the pitcher's hand before you're in game action. Who knows if that affected timing or whatnot. It does seem weird to have had an entire team slump over 2 games in which only 2 runs were scored. And it's, of course, frustrating when had you scored 2 runs in any of those games, the end result would have been different. But this is where we are. And if the rule is Atlanta did their job. They split in Houston, and Houston did their job by forcing it back to Houston in middle games. And so, hopefully the Astros can stay hot. Hopefully that they will continue to just hit the ball. And they've already seen Max Fried once. They did hit him. So hopefully they'll force a game 7 where anything can happen. Now, the thing is, I'm going to talk about the tomahawk chop. And it's funny to me how that subject kind of plays for me, because I kind of didn't think it would be something that I would have any interest at all in talking about. And the fact is, it's something I even really thought about. We haven't played the Braves in forever. When they used to play them regularly, I was a younger man who didn't really concern himself with such things as what the chop sort of represented and looked like. And I don't know, it hit different. And the other thing too with the series is I haven't really listened to the TV broadcast at all. I haven't listened to the TV broadcast at all this playoffs. I get my laptop out and I sync up Robert and Steve, and I'm about 3 pitches behind, but here I go down the road. And so I didn't hear it until late in game 4 when Jessica and I were out in San Antonio doing some Halloween stuff. Actually, I guess that would have been game 3. You guys, the chop is gross and it needs to go away. And I tweeted something about it, and people were positive in the public sphere about it, and then kind of going after me in DMs. And one guy said, listen, he brought up that he was half native, and that's fine. And obviously it's not an experience I have. But just because you're a thing and you're not offended by a thing, or handful of people who identify the same way who are also not offended, doesn't make the thing not offensive. And I don't know that they should change the name, right? Like, I don't know that the Cleveland Indians should have changed it. And I know they did it they did it sort of willingly, and they weren't really put any political pressure. I do think that there is a scale. And I think the Washington Redskins is mathematically racist, right? Like, it's literally a slur about the color of their skin. And we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't have a football team named after African Americans that reference their black skin. We wouldn't have a mascot referencing, Latino, Latinx, Tejano populations representing their brown skin. So why would we do it with red skin, right? And then there's also examples that I'm sorry, but I do agree with. I think about the Spokane Indians and how that tribe works with that team to specifically design branding and design the look, and they were part of all of it. And then I think we see what Florida State happens with Seminole Nation. The problem is that the Atlanta Braves have sort of said that there are these organizations that matter, and then none of that's dubious, or all of that's dubious, none of it really adds up. And it seems to me that when you have a team called the Braves, and then you have a bunch of white people doing the chop, it's a bad look, and it's offensive. It's gross. And I just hope that they move past it. The team does encourage it for as much as they want to say that they don't. It is just it's something that really shouldn't exist in 2021. And I know that, people have thoughts of cancel culture and slippery slopes and all that stuff. And, I think we all should be striving to be at least smart people who can acknowledge the fact that not everything is the same, not everything is a monolith, and that some things should be judged differently than other things. And so I think in this particular case, the chop, which you're essentially mocking native cultures with the OOO thing, the chanting part, is offensive, and it's going to be offensive to more people than it's not. And holding up a couple of people of that nationality and that heritage to say it's not racist is the same thing as saying I can tell racist jokes because I have 3 black friends. You can't do that. So, hopefully we move past it. This is not an indictment on Braves players. It's not an indictment on Braves fans. It's not even an indictment on Braves fans who still want the chop. I think it's just something that we should probably have a more honest conversation about than what we've had. This series has been fun. I've said it over and over again. It's been really cool to interact with so many Braves fans that seem to be really cool people and are enjoying it. And I said the other day that the hallmark of this series has been a bunch of people calling us cheaters, a bunch of people calling them racists, really, because it's 28 fan bases that feel like they should be there. And really it's 3 fan bases that always feel entitled to be there because Major League Baseball makes them feel that way. So, the Astros fans, we have a game left that we know about. I'm confident in tomorrow night. I think that we will come out, and I think we'll keep swinging the bat. I think that home field's going to play. Listen, if you're one of those people at Minute Maid Park and you've got corporate tickets and you're going to the World Series Game 6 because you think it would be cool and neat, don't go. Give that ticket to some Astros fan who's been there for every single regular season game and has been hanging on every pitch. Have them go because they can affect that game and they can win and they can be a big part of this team winning another World Series. And now on Let's Get To your favorite full-time curmudgeon, unless there's an episode of Ted Lasso on, Andy Tom Chesson. And we're back here on Go Astros, jumping on with Andy Tom Chesson. Andy, first of all, before we get into last night's game, let's talk about another exciting game. Just real quick, 4 years ago today, the Astros win their first World Series. By the way, still your 2017 World Series champions. Just take me back to that day for you. What was it like? What do you remember? Do you remember anything?
I remember hiding because at some point I realized after we had, I watched the first several innings straight on. And then I get really, really weird about my superstitions, what I can and can't do during a game when we're winning, especially if it's important. So I had to watch, I could watch anytime we were hitting because you can't lose runs when you're hitting in baseball, which is one of the nice things. Not like
we
football.
Are the same person.
But when we were pitching, I had to stand in the kitchen and watch through a mirror on the wall what was happening because wasn't going to trust the game day app, and I could hear the noise, and the game day app would have been too slow at that point. So it was a whole thing. I also remember because my son, who is not he's very much a sports ball guy, doesn't really pay attention to the sports, stuck his head out during the 9th inning to try to watch the game and said, "No, you've watched no innings. You can watch no more. Go to your room." So I did not let him watch. I think I let him watch the very last ground ball to Altuve on the Gurriel. I let him come out for that.
There'll be no innings for you. You watch 0 innings.
There are no innings if you don't put in the work. You put in the work early, even if it's through a mirror from your kitchen.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I'm still that way with us pitching. You're exactly right. Nothing bad can happen when you're hitting. Just not good stuff can happen. And and so when we're particularly playoff baseball, the hitting is on TV, knowing I'm streaming and I'm behind. Pitching, it is the TV, but the game day app is up, and I can go okay, I can keep watching. Nothing bad happens. Like that.
I find myself, even if I'm not watching the game day app, even now, staring at my phone, and if no alert comes, that means nothing happened. No run scored if no alert came.
There you go. You see, we're so weird. It's interesting because I was thinking about this. We both believe that there will be not much of, if any, season next year, which means we'll miss basically a year of celebrating the 5th anniversary of the World Series, which I think the Astros would have done. But alas, it probably won't happen.
Yep. It's going to be disappointing, and certainly I'm projecting, but it is projecting to be a disappointing and dark off season and a long one. I not necessarily to the point of giving up on having a baseball season next year, but I don't see any way, with the rumblings coming out of the Major League Baseball front office and the wording they're starting to use on things, that there's not going to be a prolonged labor stoppage or lockout or whatever you want to call it. And I don't see any way that there's going to be a full 162 played next year. I just don't. I think the issues between the two sides are too deep and too contentious. And there seems to be a lot of will amongst the owners to break the union's probably the wrong term to use in 2021, but that's what they're trying to do. They're certainly trying to splinter it, and they've been trying to splinter it for the last 5 years.
I think, obviously we're going to talk a lot about this on our new show that launches after the World Series, but yeah, I think you could even look at how they handled the Astros as a way of trying to divide the union. I think the sticky stuff thing was a way of dividing the union. I think everything that they've done has been going after the union. So yeah, it's going to be dark, and we might not get, that sort of 5-year celebration. It also means we might not get a celebration of the World Series that we are now within spit and distance of winning. Talk to me about last night. What were your first thoughts when the Grand Slam went over the wall?
Similar to the Boston series, and we have that recent frame of reference, I wasn't crushed when he hit that home run because it was in the first inning. It was so early in the game. And we immediately came back, so that, sure, you don't want to see that happen, and you don't want to see Fromber struggle. That was the bigger takeaway for me, was that Fromber walked 2 guys or 1 guy, and it was just he very clearly didn't have his control.
Right.
And we know enough about Fromber Valdez is he's not a guy that starts off slow and gets better as the game's on. He's either good at the beginning or he's not good at all. And that's what happened again last night. He gave up the runs. The big thing for me is in the bottom of that inning, or top of the next inning, we immediately came back and got 2. This wasn't a Boston situation where we gave up a grand slam, got shut down, and then gave up another grand slam. And it was all of a sudden 8-0 or 8-1, and then 9-2. And that wasn't the situation. They immediately got back into the game. And even Fromber settled down a little bit. He was still wild, but he, gave up the other home run and got pulled after 2 2/3. So I'm guessing if you, in a worst case scenario, we're in a game 7, he would kind of be available to pitch again if you wanted him to, but I can't imagine anybody you'd want to bring him in to face. So he's pretty much done for the series. But no, last night was, I've said this was going to be a 7-game series.
You did.
You certainly don't want to be behind 3-1 or 3-2, but to go 7 games, that's at some point somebody's got to win 3 games and somebody's got to win 4. So that's kind of still where I'm seeing things. The big question on my mind is, can the Astros win 3 games in a row? Certainly they can, but as they're currently constructed and as they're currently hitting the ball, can they? Because even last night,
let's talk about how they're hitting the ball. Like, I mean, look, so game 2 they score 7 runs.
Mm-hmm.
Game 5 they score 9.
Mm-hmm.
Games what? How does math work? Games 3 and 4 they score a total of 2. But the reality is, and I know that people don't want to look for an excuse, but I'm sorry. I think being able to take BP and getting to see what the ball looks like coming out of a hand absolutely affected the offense. I actually expect them to keep rolling at home.
That's a very true statement. And that's kind of where I was with the first 2 games in Atlanta. You don't get to take batting practice. You don't get to develop a way to pick up the ball from whatever the batter's eye, because one of the unique things about baseball, and one of the things I think we love, is every park's a little bit different, right? So the dimensions are what they are within the diamond, but in the outfield, it could be anything up to and including a hill and a flagpole and live tigers or, whatever you have.
Definitely want live tigers. Definitely into that.
Don't slide into second when the live tiger is covering. That's just a rule.
It's just a
But
rule.
it does require, especially when you've got a bunch of guys who have not been in that. When did Truist open? Yeah, I mean, it's relatively recently, right?
It's relatively recently. I believe some of the 2017 guys did play in that series. They played 2 games there in 2017. That was the last time the Astros.
But that's literally what we're talking about. 4 years ago, a couple of the guys have hit there before.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of guys who spent a lot of time in the National League other than Zach Greinke, who, by the way, is batting .667 with a 1,300 OPS.
MVP.
He is our leading batter. But that's a huge deal. And I think you get to a third game and we're still not hitting with any kind of power. The only 2 home runs that this team has are coming from Altuve, who's just sitting dead pull right now. So we're making contact, and that's one of the things this team does well is put balls in play. And last night they found a bunch of holes, and that's how they scored runs. And when they scored 7 runs in game 2, that's how they found it. They're not a team that's crushing the ball right now. And you look at the guys who are your usual suspects for that. Alvarez is hitting .063 for this series.
Yeah.
As hot as he was against Boston, he is that cold against Atlanta. Bregman, who has been moved down in the lineup, is batting like 111, 117, and that's after getting a double last night. 111. And Tucker, who is not bad by any means, hitting 333, but his slugging is 444. So he's barely slugging more than he's getting on base, which isn't a great recipe for somebody who's supposed to be a power hitter. So we're down in this series primarily because the Braves pitching has been better than our hitting. I don't even think that our, in the notorious almost no hitter game, we pitched really, really well.
Yeah.
That was a 2-0 game or 2-0 game. That's how are you mad at Luis Garcia for anything that happened in that game? How are you mad at anybody that happened? I mean, it's we didn't hit. We scored.
Yeah. There's of course been hate thrown at Christian Javier, and that guy's been lights out, and he made 2 mistakes, but that made it a 3-2 game. It didn't make it a 7-5 game where you can now be upset. It was a 3-2 game.
Yeah. So I think, our bullpen has performed well, and they've had to. I'm guessing Odorizzi's starting Tuesday night.
I think they're going to start Garcia on short rest and then go to Odorizzi.
I mean, that's where we're at. And so our bullpen's going to have to continue to step up. And the name of this show has never been more apt. The Astros are absolutely in a situation where they need to get 2. That's the only way they win. They're going to have to figure out a way to win 3 in a row. And we're in a situation where everything has to happen to win game 6, all hands on deck for game 6. And you hope you get to game 7 and figure it out from there. And you hope that Luis Garcia at home is going to be able to pull another piece of magic out of his hat and no hit a team for 5 innings. But at least being competent and being in the game for 5 or 6 innings would go a really long way towards getting us to a game 7 if he gets the start. And that's kind of where we are. It's just you hope everything goes right because there's no margin for error at this point.
Yeah, I really think I'm going to living with the idea that games 3 and 4 are really just an offensive aberration due to a lot of the things we talked about, weather and whatnot. I expect them to hit Max Fried again. They've hit him once already. And I do think this is where playoff experience matters. And I think that the Astros have actually been here before. First of all, they won a game 7 in recent memory. And I think, I don't think anything faces this team. I really do expect them to go out and play great tomorrow night and force game 7.
Well, I'm hoping the micro trend continues versus the macro trend. The macro trend is that home teams don't win World Series games. And that's been going on for a few years now. This year has been a little bit of an aberration in that the Braves won 2 or 3 at home, which hasn't been the case for the road team in this series to do. So I'm hoping the Astros can finally get to the point where they take care of business in Minute Maid Park. I know 2017 will always be special, But it would be even better if you can actually win a World Series in your home park in front of your home crowd. I think the city of Houston would actually just shut down for a few days. I mean, if we make it to Game 7 and happen to win that's a Wednesday night. I don't foresee any actual work being done Thursday or Friday. And I don't mean like us right now, not at work, but working, but not at work. I mean, just don't come in. There's no point in coming in. The roads are littered with abandoned cars. It's like a zombie movie, but everybody's happy.
I for one hope we see that. Let's talk a little bit about the chop, just real quick. I talked about it in the opening. Where do you sit on the tomahawk chop?
It's I, speaking as a white man in 2021, I realize my opinion is not all that valuable in this situation, but it's gross, I guess is the nicest way to put it. And I'm not somebody who is easily offended. We've talked offline about our love of Mel Brooks movies.
Yeah.
It's not something where I'm just aghast and horrified. And I have some friends that are aghast and horrified that this is still happening in 2021. My issues are, it's derivative because they stole it from Florida State, who was a football powerhouse in the early 90s. The Braves had a miracle season in, I guess, 91, where they went from worst team in the league in 90 to a World Series appearance against the Twins in 91. And they stole it there because, we also have Indians or Native Americans as our mascot, so we'll do that. The difference for me now is that it's a very Georgia, Atlanta thing where they're doing it to be obstinate versus actually listening to the conversation. I think Florida State still does it, but Florida State actively works with the Seminole Nation and has talked about ramifications and asked if, is this okay for us to do? Can we continue? Can we use you as our symbol, our mascot for our team? And that name is a place of honor. I'm not offended by the name Braves. I don't think it's necessarily has the racist connotations that Redskins does. Right. But I feel like Atlanta has leaned into it because they're being told they shouldn't. It's, the same way that a lot of people have dealt with COVID or vaccinations is, well, I know you're telling me it's a good thing to do, so I'm not going to do it. Screw you. I don't want to wear a mask. But that's kind of what it is. It's people are telling us we can't do it, and we're going to rally around this vaguely racist chant. It's just gross, and it's not intimidating. And I don't think anybody's lost a baseball game or hung a pitch because they heard somebody going, so it's just it's ridiculous that we still hold these things that we try to make important because, well, my father did it or my teenage son did it, or it's not worthy of the tradition or worthy of the effort that people are putting in trying to protect it or explain it away. And that includes Rob Manfred. The idea that he doesn't want to weigh into it because baseball is a regional sport is exactly what's wrong with baseball. He's the commissioner of baseball, not the commissioner of the New York region, not the commissioner of the American League region or the Northeast region. He's the commissioner of Major League Baseball. So that means he should have oversight as he continues to demonstrate in Houston, where he wants to open a roof. And ultimately, it's the same thing, right? I'm going to do this because nobody's going to yell at me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk about that because I don't want anybody criticizing me. And it's just, it's weird. And I think it's further going into my personal belief that Jim Crane sold his soul a little bit during the sign stealing scandal to come out as unscathed as he personally did. That he is basically signed on to be Rob Manfred's bitch for as long as Rob Manfred's running baseball. Whereas, the Braves ownership group probably doesn't have the same kind of agreement, so they can get away with what they want to get away with.
Yeah, and like I said before, I think both of you were not saying that every Braves fan is a racist, none of that stuff, but just and I also don't necessarily think the name should change. I just feel like, well, I guess the name should change in the sense that, look, you're the third city to be the Braves. Like, I've always sort of think when you remove cities, you should change your name and build a new identity, but whatever.
It makes perfect sense for Utah to have a team called the Jazz. What are you talking about?
Totally about it. You know what's funny? The worst part about LA traffic is getting around all the lakes and the trolleys.
the thousands of lakes
that are in the lost.
You have to dodge them. You got to dodge those trolleys.
Got to dodge the trolleys when you're there. So, all right. Last question, man. Then, so when we meet again for the next episode you'll be on, which I think should be Thursday, are we having I'm sorry, when we meet Wednesday, excuse me, is it a sad conversation or is it a get ready for Game 7 conversation?
I'm going to steer full into Ted Lasso, even though I may end up being disappointed. I've got my believe sign in my office, and I'm going to slap it today. So I'm going to go with, I believe that when we talk Wednesday, it'll be talking about getting ready for Game 7.
All right, let's go Stros.
Go Stros.